because usually toothpaste is a super low involvement product, right? But this toothpaste actually have a super loyal fan base, okay? And that's pretty good for being a toothpaste. So what have they done to create this kind of strong loyalty?
Adding like colorful slides and then kind of entering into a Metallica concert on the bottom floor. It's not for everyone.
Just the process of buying a product, like buying a luxury product, that it in itself is an experience.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Next Gen Retail Pod. We are sitting here at the Next Gen Retail Hub, a few companies that all more or less working with retail and then enhancing the consumer experiences in retail. We're very curious, and this pod is our attempt to understand a bit more, to invite smart people, understand a bit more about the retail world, and also be able to share our ideas around. And I'm your host, I'm John Karsberg. I'm working as Head of Strategy and Insights at the Workshop. And today's episode is actually, it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun, hopefully very memorable. It's about experiences. And why we're doing this is that there's a lot of stuff being written and talked about around experiences. This is the shit. This is what everyone should strive for, to enhance the customer experience, to make sure there's an experiential layer to everything. It's what people talk about. But what is that? What is it that makes an experience? Why is it, if it is memorable, why is it memorable? And different kinds of experiences and stuff. And to make sure that, or to understand that, will make it easier to make decisions today, but also very much make it easier for companies to understand how to invest in the future. And I know a little bit about this, and I can guess a bit and discuss some things, but to be able to understand this fully, we have Sofie Sagfossen with us today, Dr Sofie Sagfossen, to help me understand this a little bit more. And without further ado, I would want to invite Sofie to give me to tell me like an experience, memorable, a retail experience, or just an experience that you has made an effect or something on you. And welcome, by the way.
Thank you, John, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. And I will tell you about a pretty ordinary retail experience, which I've had several times, actually. And it's shopping for wine at the Systembolaget. So for those who are not familiar with the Swedish system, Systembolaget is the retail monopoly selling all kinds of liquor and wine. And I think for me, as a customer, the experience I get from the interaction with the employees at Systembolaget is just brilliant, because they are most of the time, not 100%, but in the best cases, they're so knowledgeable with their expertise around wine, and they can really personalize the advice they give, and they're not even trying to sell me anything. In fact, they're not at all trying to sell me anything. They're just giving me advice on what wine to buy. And I really appreciate that kind of service and their expertise, basically.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And you and I did some research. We sat together some years ago at the Stockholm School of Economics and doing research in this area and similar areas. And you're really an expert in experiences and have done a lot of your research around this area. And currently you work in Oslo. In Oslo Nya Høyskole, if that's correct. But tell me a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I started off looking at different kinds of experiences, particular kind of active experiences like Vasaloppet, for instance, in Sweden, and long distance races, and how these kind of, extraordinary experiences, what they were doing to people. But after a while, I also got interested in experiences in general, which can be as just mentioned, like a pretty ordinary thing, like an encounter with a service employee, for instance. That is also a type of experience. So digging into all these different layers, I got more and more interested in kind of what factors make up a memorable and strong experience. And that's what I think we will go into today.
Yeah, that's basically the gist of what this is. So what is it that makes an experience or a good experience? If you try to start to decipher that, and I guess that there, as you said, everything can be an experience and ordinary or extraordinary, but just as starting with a small basic thing.
Yeah. So like a definition is that an experience is something that an event or like a series of events that you live through. So it's something that you just keep in your memory. And it's easier to understand if you think about the opposite thing. So what's an opposite thing of an experience? Well, that's a material possession. So like a ring or a shoe or anything like that. That it would be like a material possession that you can keep and own and sell or do whatever you want with. And then, of course, when it comes to experiences, they can be quite extraordinary, like climbing Mount Everest, or they can be really mundane, like going to your favorite coffee shop and have a coffee. Other dimensions that I try to think about when it comes to experiences are whether they are social or solitary. So research has shown that people often like overestimate the social value of experiences. That is, they underestimate like how much they will actually enjoy experiences in solitude. So one study looked at this and they actually found that people can quite enjoy having experiences alone, but we tend to not want to experience things on our own in general. Another dimension to think about is whether the experience is active or passive for the customer. So some passive experiences would be regarded as like going to a museum, perhaps like watching a movie. But this is also on a continuum, right? Whereas running a marathon or skiing in the Vasaloppet, that's quite an active, you're an active part of the experience, right? So there's different degree of involvement from the customer side. And like in a retail setting, you could, if I take an example, if you go into one of the Retal's stores, you can be quite an active consumer because you can actually try out the products on your hands. You can smell them. You can try and scrub your hands and wash them. So you can actually, test the product and be quite active in the purchase if you want to. You can, of course, also be quite passive and just buy a product like the regular way. So those are some aspects that I also think about when I think about experiences. But I want to mention one thing here, and it's easy to get a bit confused because also products can have a really strong, like material products can have a really strong experience attached to them. So one of my favorite examples of this is the toothpaste. It's called Effimol. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's by Johnson & Johnson. And it's a toothpaste. They sell it in the UK. I'm not sure it exists in Sweden yet, but in the UK and elsewhere, you can get this toothpaste, which is very special because usually toothpaste is a super low involvement product, right? But this toothpaste actually have a super loyal fan base, okay? And that's pretty good for being a toothpaste. So what have they done to create this kind of strong loyalty for a product like toothpaste? Well, the first thing is that the color of the toothpaste is bright pink. So it's super shocking. It's very unexpected. Moreover, the taste is kind of, what should I say, herb-like and medical tasting, very special taste. I won't call it good or bad. It's just very different, okay? And then the packaging is very nostalgic. It has this kind of old pharmacy-looking feel to it. So 10 years ago, they had to take it off the market due to some EU regulation. And what happened was that the fans, I would call it, of this toothpaste they got really upset and they started hoarding the product. And at its height, it was sold on eBay for more than £10 per tube. So more like 6 times the retail price of a toothpaste. And I use this as an example to show that even like a low involvement, perhaps trivial to many product like toothpaste is actually a product where you can create engagement and quite a lot of loyalty and apparently willingness to pay by adding experiential elements to it.
That's really cool. I need to see where I can get one, like a bright pink toothpaste, and that would be in line with my overall brand. But then you talk about like the social element, you talk about the active and passive. What are the a really, really strong experience then that would last for a long time, or something that then a retailer would want to get that? What are then the components that they should strive for? And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's general to all experiences, not only to retail experiences, but I will give you an example, which is not from retail this time, because it just encompasses all of the different values of experiences that are driving memorability. So one thing that we talked about is that the social value. And so if an experience is social in its nature, it's usually considered more valuable. So something that you can do or share with others. So you can also share those social media. That's a social aspect to it. The other part is that experiences can be a part of our identity to a larger extent. So what I mean by that is that what you do says more about you sometimes than what you kind of own, in a sense. So when people are asked to tell me something about yourself, it will tell me more about you if you say that you participated in the Vasaloppet compared to if you told me that you, own a piece of, clothing or something like that. So it says more about you and your identity, I think. So social value and identity, and to the extent that products can strengthen those aspects, it's usually a good thing overall. But my example that I will tell you about is from a large concert at Ullevi in Gothenburg when Metallica played a couple of years ago. So the arena was sold out, obviously. They hadn't played in Sweden for a long, long time. And what they did, Metallica, in the middle of the concert was that all of a sudden they started playing the Staten and Kapitalet song by a famous Swedish punk rock band called Ebba Grön. And of course the audience was super surprised, and it became one big sing-along happening where everybody was just singing Staten and Kapitalet together. And why it became large headlines, it got widely shared in the media. And what was it about this thing that made it so, why did this enhance the experience, basically? So one thing it did was that it showed a high level of skill and competence on the part of the band, because they actually sang in Swedish and they had to practice this song. And also they actually made the effort to practice, to rehearse it and play it, because that is also another thing that everyone there understands, that this song was unique. You can't play Staten and Kapitalet if you go to Finland, right? Because they will not understand it. So everyone understood that this is also a unique thing. They did this, Metallica practiced this song just for us, just for this audience, which makes it unique and rare. And rare and scarcity is, of course, driving value of everything, both regular material goods, but also experiences. The other thing was that, of course, that it was novel. Nobody had seen them do this before. And it created variety, which is also a factor which increased the value of experiences. And I think all of these aspects that I mentioned, the social value, the contribution to your identity, showing some kind of skill and effort, novelty, variety, and uniqueness, all these factors are super general, and you can apply them to basically anything.
And the effects, you talked a little bit about memory, and emotional. What are what's psychologically happening, and why is it something to strive for, to get like the experience, the experiential response from people?
Yeah, well, there I think we have a whole array of different outcomes, to speak in academic terms. But of course, you could just get like very emotional responses like joy and happiness, but you can also derive meaning, which is a more complex concept, I guess. You can derive a lot of meaning from experiences, but you can also derive meaning from material possessions. So this is not like in contradiction to each other. Of course, if you're super sentimental about a specific gadget or a thing or something if you people that are into watches, for instance, I mean, that's a material product, but they can have a lot of meaning to people. So it can add meaning to people's lives. But also it can, of course, in retail terms, it can create loyalty. It can improve your attitude towards, for instance, going back to my example of buying wine at Systembolaget. That definitely makes me want to go there again and ask for more help, because they helped me so much in the past to choose the right wine for the right occasions.
When, as I said in the beginning here, with everyone talking about experiences and creating a customer experience in a retail context, in many contexts, but a lot in the retail context, is it for everyone? Is it always, this is what you should always do? Strive to create strong experiences, or?
Yeah, I think you should always try to consider it, because either way you want it or not, you will have some kind of experience around your retail store or your product and so on. So it's always worth like considering the elements. But I would say that there is not one formula, like this is how you do it and then everything will be okay. And I will actually give you an example. Usually in my marketing classes, I bring up Abercrombie and Fitch, because as you remember, at least some years, like a decade back or so, they were super innovative with their retail store, in-store experience, right? So they had much darker lighting. So they engaged all the five senses, basically. They have darker lighting, they had loud music playing in the store, they had strong scents from their own perfumes. So it was like almost going into like a tax-free store with very strong scents for the smelling senses. What else did they do? Yeah, they also engaged some other things that were kind of in their marketing strategy with like these really, lightly dressed models and so on. So there were many things going into it. So, and was that good or bad? Well, it's hard to say. Like for instance, it did create an awful lot of interest. So they managed to gain attention, right? Because they were doing the whole experience was so different. So people were like queuing to get into the store at the beginning. But then after some time, it turned out that those visits and all the attention did actually not turn into a profit on the bottom line of the I was going to say the balance sheet, but the other sheet of this. I'm not in accounting, obviously. Okay. But, compared to other fashion chains. So all of this, even if they did get a lot of attention, so the bottom line was they did not make any more money or profit from their clothing sales, at least after some years. So then I know that they adjusted this strategy, and I think they cut back a little bit on the scents and so on. So this is not to say that all of the things that they did were not working. I don't know exactly what parts of that of the in-store experience that did enhance or detract from the purchases. I'm just giving it as an example to say that you can't just, engage all the senses and then everything will be fine, for instance. Smelling, for instance, that's a super difficult thing to work with, because it turns out that people have very different tastes when it comes to smell, and it's easy. I think it's probably more easy to get it wrong than to get it right. So that's like a caveat. Whereas other things are probably easier to work with, like how nice your staff is, for instance. that's something that is usually positive. The nicer they are, the better it is.
There's so many things happening at the moment in retail and in the world as such, and so many developments, and we have AI developments and store digital, lots of different touch points and social media, etc., and all of those channels are developing. But looking at the future then and the experiential layer around, will it be, I guess, more or less important going forward? Or is it just always important?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious difference between like digital online shopping and in person in-store shopping. I would say it's the obvious thing that in-store you can play with more senses, right? And online you just have the visuals and the sound. Those are the things that you can actually affect. Whereas in-store you could do a lot more with working with all 5 senses. I think that's the big difference. But I haven't seen. I mean, there's some retailers that are obviously engaging the senses a lot, and I think luxury brands are usually really good at this. They have thought through every aspect of using our senses, and they're very deliberate about it. It's my feel, at least.
If you are then to give some advice looking forward a few years or somewhat, like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years or so, talking to a retailer, what would you want a general retailer to do different compared to today? And you advise them to invest in or focus on? Overall,
I think many stores, they just need to like work on the basics. I think like lighting, sound, the audio in stores, and like their service encounters. I mean, many are even not even doing the basic stuff right, in my opinion. So they should just start there without like doing, extra concerts and adding niche punk rock songs, like I think that's the icing on the cake, if you know what I mean.
So adding like colorful slides and then kind of entering into a Metallica concert on the bottom floor, that's not for everyone then?
No, I don't think so. Like one interesting thing now, like given like the economic environment that we're in, I mean, I'm not an economist, obviously, but some people are talking about recession or slowdown, at least and I know in many of the retail branches, this can be seen. And one thing that has been shown in research is actually that in general, like on average, people when economy goes down, people are more likely to turn to buying material possessions compared to pure experiences. And the reasons driving this effect is that people perceive material goods as keeping their value over time. And that makes kind of sense, because if you and I would go out and have a dinner together and have a really nice evening, and that would be an awesome experience. But then it's gone. Like I can't do anything with it. It's in my memory, and it was probably social and awesome and everything, but I can't keep it. I can't sell it, and I don't kind of have the value. I only have the memory. Whereas if I get the psychological feeling, at least, if I buy a product, a material thing, I can keep it in my possession, and that I have this sense that I keep the value, so I can store the value over time. And of course, we all know that's not true with most products. They are not a store of value, and they're not investments. But of course, there are
there's certain physical elements that are kept anyway. So maybe then combining both then the product and adding on an experiential layer would be
exactly
the optimal, trying to charge then the physical products with experience then.
Yeah, so I think you can, I mean, there are always experiential aspects to products, but also I think what luxury brands are doing well is that just the process of buying a product, like buying a luxury product, that in itself is an experience. So it's an experience going to the store, being served really well by their well-trained staff, and walking out of the store with this gigantic luxury bag. I think that for many people is an experience in and of itself.
Cool.
So it doesn't need to be that revolutionary in all cases. You can also create, like, I think what many don't think about, you can create like variation, like one of these aspects that I talked about. That is a way to, I think, both drive attention, but also to create like small moments of joy, like that actually vary some things. And I will give you an example from my favorite coffee shop in Stockholm, which is called Retal. It's a classic cafe. And before, when I used to write my PhD thesis over there was this guy that worked in the cafe, and he worked there for a long time. And what he did was that not every day, but many times per week, he changed his hat. So when you went into the store, you would have a new hat on, and he had the craziest of hats that you can imagine. So it was just like a small feature, and that was not like a part of his job description or anything, but he just happened to collect hats of many different forms and shapes, basically. And it was such a delight. It just made the whole interaction so much more fun. And it's a small thing. It creates variation, novelty, and kind of uniqueness. Just this little small thing.
Cool. So then to kind of summarize it, get the basics right and wear different kinds of hats, as an example. Thanks a lot, Sofie. It has been an experience and a delight, as always, to talk to you and to be able to pick your brain a little bit. And thanks for everyone who's listened. And we will be back with another pod episode soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.